Hello, everybody. A warm welcome to Wisdom from North, the place where we're diving into the deeper meaning of life and asking the big questions. My name is Jannike, and today I'm here with Dr. Lani Leary, who is the author of Healing Hands and No One Has to Die Alone. Lani has been working as a psychotherapist for more than 35 years, specializing in working with chronically ill, dying, and bereaved clients. Now, when she was 29 years old, she had a life-altering near-death experience during a routine at the dentist's office. And this is what we're going to speak about today. Hello, Dr. Lani Leary. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
I'd love to have you because I discovered your near-death experience online because I search a lot for knowledge and information about the afterlife, and I'm very curious about what happens when we die. And I found it so interesting to hear about your journey, and I know that this is all connected to your journey and your life as well, like what you've started working with. And I know that you've been sitting together with 500 people who were about to die, and so you have a lot of experience with people dying, and then having a near-death experience yourself is just like, it just fits. So let us start with this experience and hear about it. But first, did you have a belief system, a certain belief system before this happened? Like, were you religious or an atheist? Or?
No, I wouldn't say I wouldn't say I was religious, and I wouldn't say I was an atheist. I grew up, I think, as many Americans did, and I might go to an Easter service. I might go to a Christmas service. We certainly celebrated Christmas. In my family, we didn't talk about religion. We didn't talk about the faith. So I didn't really grow up that way. I wouldn't say that I was really participating in one way or another. Yeah.
So this is a long time ago. You were 29 years old, right?
Yeah. This is a long time ago, yes.
Yes, and you were in the dentist's office just going to have like this routine procedure. Like what happened?
Well, I'm not sure, of course, what happened, and I'm not sure that it was anyone's fault or error or anything. I was in the dentist chair one minute and getting laughing gas or nitrous oxide the next to put me out, and my body must have gone into anaphylactic shock, almost, an allergic reaction. At that time when I was 28, 29, I had not had any alcohol. I didn't use any medication or prescriptions. I'd never done drugs, and I think that my body was just was not used to any kind of interference. So and I'd not had any surgeries before then, except for childbirth, and no anesthesia then either. So my body just reacted, and one minute I was lying back in the dentist chair, and the next minute I was aware that I was up in the corner of the room looking down at this inert body that I recognized as my own, but I had no emotional connection to it. I had a fondness for it. I knew that it was my shell, but I wasn't anxious or fearful or there was no trauma to it. There was no emotional trauma, and there was no physical trauma to me leaving the body. But I was up in the corner of the room, and I saw the dentist being very frantic, and I was trying to communicate with the dentist, telling him that I was okay, that all was well, not to worry. And of course, he didn't receive that message. I was not aware of time. Time didn't seem to be a concept. So there was no sense of urgency or hurrying or anything, but I knew that that attempt was over, and I couldn't communicate with him. And the next thing that I was aware of was entering a tunnel, and my mother was right outside the tunnel with her arms open wide. And this was very significant because my mother had been dead at that point for 13 years. She died, 15 years. She died when I was 13. And she died suddenly and unexpectedly, and traumatically. She hemorrhaged. So it was not a peaceful death. I wasn't there at the time, but it was very important to me to see her again and to heal my own regret and guilt about not being present for her when she died. And so I saw her and I absolutely recognized her. I knew it was her. But what was most significant about that meeting was that she was whole and she was beautiful and she was healthy and she was healed. She was the mother before any trauma. And we connected on every level. And again, there was no fear. I wasn't startled to see her. She just, welcomed me in as a mother would. And we communicated. And again, that was significant because I had felt so badly that I hadn't communicated with her before she died. And telepathically, so I didn't move my lips or anything, but I thought and she received messages. And the message that was most profound was, I miss you. And she communicated to me, again, telepathically, but really it was a vibration that went around me, almost as though it was her arms around me saying, I know. And underneath that message of I know, what I really understood and took in was she knew that I had missed her because she had always been with me, always. And in all my worrying and trying to grow up without a mother, I always wished that every single day I could have asked her something or talked to her or had her with me in some way. And what she was telling me was she had always been with me. And then the next thing that I thought and she received was, I love you, because I wasn't able to say that to her right before she died. And she received that. And again, the message was as though a vibration of arms around me. I know. So there had never been any separation between us. And I still carry that with me every day. And I know that deeply in me. And it makes a difference in how I live my life, especially as I'm now separated physically from many other loved ones. And I'm only physically separated from them, but not emotionally and not from the heart. So at that point, after I communicated that with my mother, I noticed a light deep in the tunnel, and I had to go to it. It wasn't a wish. It wasn't a thought. It was a pulling, like a magnet, a magnet pulling me. And I went into the tunnel toward the light. Again, no sense of fear, apprehension, no pain, no sense of time. And when I was in this tunnel, I experienced it as a color and a sound and a feeling. And the color was of a beautiful, beautiful mother of pearl opalescent blue. And when I close my eyes, I can still see it. And I heard a sound that was very ethereal, an ethereal symphony. And again, so I was very comforted as I went toward this light. And the light was very, very bright. And I saw the light, and it should have blinded me. But of course, I didn't have physical eyes. And I was in front of the light, and then the light was around me, and then I was in the light. And some of the wisdom that I bring back with me is that once I was in the light, and I knew that I was the same as the light.
This is familiar to somebody I've interviewed named Jon Skau. He's Norwegian. He said exactly the same thing. Then he realized that he was the light. So that was like, wow.
Which is not an arrogant or a sacrilegious or a it's not a haughty thing to say at all. It's a returning home. It's a realization of what our true nature is. And I was home. That's how I felt. And I never wanted to leave, even though I had a very happy life. And I had a husband I was in love with and a child that was just 2 years old. And but there was so much that almost was downloaded, wisdom that was downloaded, that I can't even pick apart now, but there's so much that I knew all was well. After, I had this realization that I was home and I never wanted to leave. All was well, even though I was separated from my family back here. And the next thing I knew, it was almost as though I was settling in, to a comfy couch. And the next thing I knew, I received again, I heard, you must go back from the light. And I thought, in a yelling almost sort of way, no. And the light said again to me, you must go back. You have work to do. And I still protested, no. And the next thing I knew, I felt my energy swirling back through the tunnel. And the next thing I was aware of consciously was that I was awake in the dentist chair with no brain damage, or disoriented, yes, confused, not about what had happened, but what am I doing back was more of the question.
Do you know how long you were away?
Approximately 7 to 10 minutes.
That long?
Yes, with no...
the dentist must have been in shock.
Yes, he was. Didn't really even want to talk about it, just wanted to make sure that I was coherent and breathing.
Did you tell him right away what had happened, or no?
No, I did not tell him. In fact, I didn't tell anyone except my husband for about 5 years, because there was a piece of me that felt that no one would well, first of all, I had not known anyone that had this experience. And so this was out of the lexicon for me. And I really didn't have language to describe what had happened to me. But more importantly, it was so precious to me that I didn't want anyone to pick it apart. And I didn't want any of that skepticism or cynicism. I didn't want anyone to touch it. It was really like a newborn baby that I needed to protect, this experience. It changed me, but I didn't know how it had changed me, really. I didn't know what I was going to do with it in this world. And that was part of my disorientation, was now what? If I had been sent back because I had work to do, I was confused about what the work was. Of course, I knew I was a flawed, vulnerable human being, but I was confused about the purpose of using this life. I mean, I knew that it was important to be a mother, but why was I here? So, but when I came back, my husband did. He just looked at me and knew something was different. And so I did tell him, but I didn't try to explain it to anyone else for years and years. Yeah.
So let's go through the experience once again, because I get so many questions, but I wanted to let you tell the whole story. So first, you move out of the body. Like, did you feel yourself in that new existence, or how should we call it? Were you in another body, or were you just airy, or can you try to like paint a picture of what you were?
No, I'm not aware. I'm not aware that I looked down and saw another body, and I didn't experience a physical sensation of leaving this body. It was I was looking out of my consciousness toward my mother. I was looking out and experiencing as consciousness moving through this tunnel. I was almost, I was able to see and hear the tunnel experience, but I didn't need a body.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I don't really even want to interpret, but, perhaps I didn't feel any anxiety. The consciousness was beyond brain, beyond physical body, beyond all of that. Again, it was the same matter as the light.
Right.
Yeah.
So firstly, how did you then see that it was your mother? How did you recognize her?
I don't know. I just know that I did, beyond doubt.
So,
So my consciousness recognized her consciousness. Again, I would be interpreting, but once we love, I think we're always connected.
okay, so because I get these pictures in my mind, like how it could look like if I met my mother.
Well, I guess here's one way that I would say it, is that even if you were blind, you would still recognize your mother's voice, yes?
Yes.
And if you were blind and deaf, my guess is that you would still recognize your mother's touch. And if for some reason you were not able to have the sense of touch, but you were deaf and blind, I bet you would be able to smell your mother and know that it was her, beyond a doubt. We're imprinted to each other, when we love.
It's just a knowing and awareness. It seems like people are saying that you just know. It's just the way it is. Because here on earth, our mind comes in and makes so many problems.
I think you're trying to understand this from your head, and this experience comes from the heart and from the soul. So again, I think the heart and the soul almost don't have the language for what you're trying to grasp, conceptualize through the head.
And still, I think it's important that we do try to talk about it. Otherwise, it gets too airy. So it's kind of like perhaps inventing even new words. I can imagine that in the future we will have more words for this actually in the language. So were you aware of other consciousness around you? Because some people meet like masters and so on.
Right. I was not. No, I didn't do that. Yeah. So I think that one of the things that is important along these lines, as you say, of ways to describe this, one of the things that happened when I came back was that I recognized the music. And I was in a store and unaware that there was just that muzak, the background music playing through the store, but my body recognized it. My body was aware of it, and all of a sudden, I just had these big crocodile tears running down my cheeks. I wasn't sad. I wasn't aware even that I was crying until my husband looked over and said, "Lani, what's the matter?" And I just paused for a moment and listened, and I heard the music and realized, oh my goodness, that was the music that I'd heard in the tunnel. So I went up to the counter and I asked them, what is this music? And they told me, and I wrote away to the composer, and I said, this is my experience, and this music that you've composed is what I heard in the tunnel. And he wrote back and said, I have not had that experience, but I have over 45 letters on my desk reporting the same thing. So music is a language that describes an experience.
Are you saying that it was kind of the same song, or it didn't just remind you of that music, but it was
that music? When I hear that music, it takes me back into the tunnel. And so I use that music consistently in my meditation and in my healing work.
Wow.
And it transports me back to an experience where I know all things are possible and healing is our natural state. So
would you like to share with us what kind of music that is?
Yes, I'm happy to share that the author's name, I pronounce it Iasos, but it's IASOS. And the music that he composed, and this is back in the 80s, early 80s, is called Angelic music. No surprise.
Huh.
Yes.
So, well, from my what I've come to is that perhaps it's like this, that in the energy world, the spirit world, that is actually where we get ideas and everything from. So he was kind of like just channeling or taking it directly down, perhaps.
That would be my interpretation also, yes.
Right. So tell us a little bit more about this light. You said that you had some downloads and you felt you were one with the light. Were you thinking or reflecting upon, wow, is this God, or thinking along those lines, or just
No, I
surrendering?
I did not have a need to understand it. I was present with it. I was involved with it. I wasn't trying to, this work here is so, I think sometimes we try to understand it as a way to replicate it and to control the experience. I had no need to control the experience. All was well. All was well. There was such a sense of love, unconditional love, and trust. I knew I was safe.
Has it been difficult for you then to move on with your life? Because many people are saying that after having a near-death experience, that it's really hard to adjust to this physical life where, as you're saying, like we're from a lot from the mind, we have to understand things, take things apart and look at them. And then you have this experience and you have almost no one to talk to about it.
Yes. Yes, I would say that for many years, at least 5 years, it was very lonely. And at times it's still lonely because, although thank goodness, for the internet and now so many stories about similar experiences, I know I'm not alone. I know I'm not different. But it was difficult to fit in. And some of the difficulty was the sensitivity that I had, the new sensitivity that I had. So I was back in a physical body, and physically I couldn't be around sharpness, anger. I couldn't go into a mindset where there was hostility of any kind, and that even included churches where I would hear there's only one way, or people will be, you're damned, or something like that. That kind of exclusion physically was painful to me. And so it was difficult to go to loud parties, or I wouldn't go to bars. And I just had to be very careful in that way. Again, it was almost as though I had new skin. So that was one way that it was difficult. And the other way that it was difficult was, again, kind of searching for what this was all about. I had a sense of using this time here with respect, with awareness, taking it as a gift. And I didn't know exactly, I didn't want to squander it. And so shortly after this experience, I was searching, but the thing that happened afterwards that really fit me in a niche again, and it was no control of mine, but I was reading the newspaper one day, and I remember clearly turning the page, and it was a full page ad or article about a hospice, a local hospice. And again, it was a feeling, it was a communication that came off the page and almost hit me and said yes. Wow. And I knew in that moment that was the path. And I've been working in one hospice or another in that capacity ever since.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible to hear. So tell us a little bit about your work now, because you remind me of Dr. Kubler-Ross, actually, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Yes.
Thank you. That's very kind.
Yes. It kind of started with her for me many years ago. So I've read some of her material. So yeah, tell us about your work. Like, what is like the main worry, I guess, for people who are losing their beloved ones who are dying? Like, if you can give some advice to how we can deal with our loved ones getting older. I can even think about, my family, that I can't handle the thought of my parents one day going away. Like, I can't think about it at all.
Yes.
So do you have any thoughts on how to deal with this?
I do, actually. And it's why I wrote my book, No One Has to Die Alone, because I wanted to pass on to people what I had learned. And so my book is actually divided into two halves. And the first is about how to help someone who's dying. And the second half is about how to help someone who's grieving. So I can start with the second half with you. You've asked about those who are left behind. So one of the things that I learned through my experiences early on with my mother's death, but then with hundreds and hundreds of others that I've been with as they died through my work, is that if you, as the bereaved, if you knew, if you believed, if you had strategies so that you knew that you could cope, you would be able to participate with the dying process, with your loved one, much more fully. And if you participated more fully in the dying process with your aging parent or your chronically ill loved one, your grief, I promise you, will be different. Because you will not have the remorse and the regret and the guilt that you could have or you should have done more to ease their pain and to comfort them through this challenging time. So if you knew, I can cope, and then find ways, how can I cope? Then you'll participate more fully. Mm. Yes. So, and there are strategies, there are skills, there are attitudes that I can teach you so that you will know you're okay. Most of us, of course, are afraid of being left alone. And my question, too, as I helped my father die recently, was how can I live in this world without you?
Right.
Right. And so one of the gifts of being with a loved one who is in the process of dying versus an unexpected and sudden death is that one of the strategies that we can work with is to rehearse how we're going to live without our loved one. Who will we be without our loved one? How will we continue to stay connected to our loved one, even after they're dead? And my experience has taught me, you see, that I'm always connected to my loved one. So when I'm missing my father, I go down to the beach where we used to walk every day, and he would tell me a different story every day. And I go down to the beach and I go alone so that I can walk with him. And then that's a way that I continue my relationship with my father. I am in the world with him, and I'm okay. He's not with me physically, but he's with me emotionally and in my heart. I am still his daughter, and I daughter him. I continue to be his daughter by taking care of the things that he cared about, by taking care of the people that he loved. And so we continue to have this relationship, you see. And then because I participated and I was absolutely present with him through his dying process, I'm able to reframe his death. And I don't think of the loss, I think of the love. I remember all of the stories that we told together right at the end. I remember looking at his scrapbook with him and him telling me stories of what this adventure meant and what this person meant in his life. I remember the laughter. It's where I focus. Mm-hmm. I focus on what I received in this relationship, not what I've lost, you see? Mm-hmm. And you can do the same thing.
I've heard somewhere that someone said to me once that you have to let the dead go as well. Like you can't hold on to them, because if you're holding on to them too tightly, then you're actually preventing them from actually moving on into the dimensions that they're supposed to move into. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, yes, I think that those who hold on out of fear. Mm. And we can let go out of love. But also, we hold on when we don't believe that we're going to be okay. or that love doesn't stay with us. So I would say to that person, look around you at all the ways every single day that you are reminded of the love between you and him.
Mm.
And when, a cardinal reminds me of my mother, every time I see a cardinal or I hear a cardinal, my response is, thank you, Mom. So it's really living from a place of gratitude and fullness rather than loss and scarcity.
Mm.
I look for proof that they're still connected to me.
So what about grieving? I mean, we are kind of speaking about it, but what about the actual grief you feel, like the sorrow, the tears? Is there, from your perspective, is it good to actually grieve and cry and everything? Is there a way to do that without moving into that fear or lack or missing or feeling that you're
Yes.
alone and scared?
Yes, absolutely. So a lot of my work right now in my private practice is with people who are grieving. And I will always have that work because unfortunately in my culture, people get very tired and impatient with another person's grief and expect people to get over it very quickly, and so the bereaved hear things like, well, aren't you over it yet? Or they only get 2 days of bereavement leave from work, things like that. And grief takes time, and grief is unique to every person. And so how long it takes you to get through your grief, to go through it. And we're never over our grief. We just learn to live with it and put it in a place that is more manageable and comfortable for us. But so my work is really to companion and to be present with a person who is grieving, to listen to their story over and over and over again until they don't need to tell it, until they are finished with the story. And in the telling of the story, they are going through the feelings. And that's one of the tasks of grief. Grief is active. It is not passive. It doesn't happen to us. We have to take that train. And so one of the first tasks of grief is to acknowledge the reality of the death. And that takes much longer than we think it does. And it takes even longer for children. But that's why we have to tell the story over and over again, because as we do it, or even as we ruminate going to bed, thinking about the last time that we saw our loved one, what that's doing is really reminding us, no, they really died. They're really gone. They're really gone. And it's very hard to wrap the brain around that thought, because they were such a big, tangible part of our life. So the first step, the first task, is to accept the reality of the death. And the second task is to feel all the feelings associated with that death. And sometimes it's not just sadness. Sometimes it's anger. Sometimes it's even gratitude that they're gone. Gratitude that a wife no longer is physically abused by her husband. Okay? But there are all kinds of feelings. We can be confused. We can be bewildered. We can be angry, sad, scared. All those feelings. We have to really wring ourselves dry of those. And again, that is by individual, in your own pace, and in your own timing, and you cannot be rushed through that. And then the third task is to learn to live in this new world without our loved one. Who are we? How do we go through this? And how do we learn the things that they used to do for us? But how do we find meaning in our life without this loved one? And then the last task is to learn how, or if, we have an ongoing relationship with that person. And that implies that we don't let go. Now, in some faiths, there is no connection beyond this life. But that's the way they make meaning of it, you see?
I didn't understand the last thing you said. That
So there are some faiths, there are some cultures that believe that once a person is dead, there is nothing more to have a relationship with.
right.
So there is no spirit, there is no soul. That is the end. And so in those cultures, in those faiths, there wouldn't be an ongoing relationship. But for the majority of the world, there is that.
But I'm thinking, like, in one way, there is a relationship still, because you still keep the person in your heart.
Yes.
So even though you might believe that we turn into a soil, then I would still have my mother in my heart. So
Yes.
in a way, it's kind of an ongoing relationship.
And then I would ask you, and what do you do with her in that place in yourself? Can you communicate with her? Can you feel her? Can you use her presence?
I just have to say that my mother is not dead, but my grandfather and grandmother is, and they are actually visiting me in my dreams, I feel like.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yes.
I speak with the medical professionals often about this, that the people that I work with who are dying often have pre-death visions that are very, very comforting. These are not hallucinations. There's nothing scary about them. The people that I sit with at the end of life report a loved one who predeceased them in the room, talking to them, coming for them. And I'll engage in that conversation and story with them. Whereas other people often don't know what to say, or they think that they are hallucinating, or they'll just patronize them, you know. I really think that there is a message in there, and it's very helpful. So I want to know, what is the person saying to you? And for instance, I'll tell you a story that one person told me that someone came on a train for them. And I said, and what was that like for you? And this patient said, I can't get on the train with my friend. I asked, why not? What's holding you back? Do you want to get on the train? He said, yes, I want to get on the train, but I can't. I said, what's holding you back? And he said, my bag isn't packed. And I said, what would you need to put in your bag if it were packed? What would you need to do to pack your bag? And so we went through, and of course it was all a metaphor for saying goodbye to this person, waiting for this loved one to come to his bedside and things like that. And so once we were able to identify what he needed, we put those things in place, and he was able to die soon afterward.
Wow, beautiful.
Yeah.
It seems like what you are saying that is that when people are about to die, it seems like they are more accepting of whatever happens, in a way that they're more open to these experiences, because I would assume that people who were younger or who were not ready to die would be like, oh, that's just fantasy in my head, like, what am I seeing?
No.
But it seems like they are accepting it. And because I've heard, I remember a friend of my family, she had cancer, and she had also said that, tonight I'm going to leave this room and fly out of the window. And another friend said, well, the window is closed. Well, then I'll fly through the roof. And she did. Like that night she died, like she knew.
We need to pay attention. Yes, we need to pay attention to the spiritual wisdom and messages. So that's a pre-death vision and communication that's very, very helpful. And you're having dreams, and that's after-death communication. And there's actually a lot of research about the validity of after-death communication, and really being able to even prove very distinct facts of those, so that a child that I'm working with who's dying and had a near-death experience and came back and reported seeing his great-grandmother, whom, of course, he had never met, and the parents report that there was no photograph or scrapbook of his great-grandmother, and yet he reported seeing her and knowing that it was her, being comforted by her, and told by her that he had, again, work in his own language, work to do, and that he had to save, I think, his little brother or something. And sure enough, he came back and told his parents, and his parents, dismissed it until he absolutely accurately described his great-grandparent. And sure enough, months afterward, I think that there was a fire in the home, and this young boy did save his younger brother. So those kinds of things, they don't surprise me at all anymore, and I listen deeply.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So have you experienced a difference between children who know they're going to die and older people?
Yes, I have. I worked in a pediatric hospice in Virginia, and what I found is that children do not fear death unless they are taught to, and that children are much more concerned. They're not concerned about their own decline or their own death. What they are concerned about, what they talk to me about, is how sad and distressed they are watching mommy and daddy cry.
Wow.
Yeah. So they pick up on the fear of separation from their parents, from their, parents'
That is
anticipatory grief. But children that I have been with at the end die almost with their arms going up. With a great, an expectation, an openness, even a joy.
Huh.
Yeah.
That must be so amazing to experience for you.
It is. It was lovely. Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of this interview now, is there anything general about what people are saying that they are happy they did in life, or that they regret in life, or when you have these conversations, is it something you can say that many people are saying, like right before they die? What are they concerned about?
Well, I think if we've done the work well, and we have the time, that a lot of the business gets finished, and we get to say goodbye. But what I never hear anyone talking about their accomplishments, really. I never hear anyone talking about their titles or their money or things like that. What I hear people talking about and caring about are their relationships and the love, the kindness that they don't forget. And if we've done the work well, then really at the end of life, there's very, very little left to say except for thank you, and I love you, and you are important in my life, and I won't forget you.
That is just so beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Lani, and thank you for your work. I feel like it's really important what you're doing, and I haven't read your book, but I would love to read it. No One Has to Die Alone. I think it's really important that we have a bigger awareness around death and start speaking more about death, because we're all going to die, and it seems like we forget that.
And we can do it differently. We can do it with love and not with fear.
Right.
We don't have to do it alone. And our loved ones can help us to not die alone when they don't have the fear.
Right.
So, yeah.
So thank you so much, and good luck with your beautiful work.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And thank you for watching, guys. Much light from Hawaii and Oslo. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.